Welcome to another episode of Distory. My name is Kirk from Rolly Crump, and today we are going to literally dive into Body Wars, an attraction that is now defunct in Epcot, yet still may or may not exist in the pavilion that still is utilized, sometimes utilized. I don't know. It's really interesting. What?
That was kind of cryptic.
Oh yeah, well you gotta reel them in, Kate. You can't just tell them everything. You know what I mean? So with me as always is the well-researched authority and author, Kate the Disney Cicerone. How are we doing this evening, Kate?
I'm doing really great. I'm looking forward to talking about this because I've heard every time I've mentioned this topic to somebody, they're just like, "Oh no, not that one." Like they can't. They didn't like this one. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's
really didn't like it.
So I think this is an 80-20 rule, and I am part of the 20% that loved this as a kid, and the 80% despised it with a passion. And honestly, its downfall is a direct result of a distaste for this attraction.
Well, our Distory friend Kevin Lively was in my chat, and I mentioned that we were going to do Body Wars, and he was like, "No, not that one. Like, that can go back to where it came from." Like, he was not having
Skipper Kevin, don't you have a jungle to cruise? Dude, save the capillaries for us. All right, we'll navigate those.
Anyway, well, so I have a little description of what Body Wars is before we kind of go back to the pavilion and talking about the things, just to give you a little overview of what this is. There's a description from the 1989 Epcot guidebook. It says, science fiction and science fact merge with state-of-the-art simulator technology to propel you on a thrilling ride through the human body. So that was their goal for Body Wars. But before we get to the actual Body Wars attraction, I feel like we need to go back to the Life and Health Pavilion, which is actually even before that. So.
Yeah, I know. It's just so cool. I mean, I think they bit off a little bit more than they can chew, but they were well-financed, so at least a lot of things happened.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so tell me, where are we headed so that I can start getting some graphics?
Let's go back to 1978.
Dude, what do you... Okay, sure.
1978. They did have cameras. So this was 4 years before the park was open. Remember when we talked about the lost pavilions at Epcot, we also talked about all the countries we didn't get. There was a model of World Showcase at that time that had a lot of countries we just never ended up getting. This is around that same time. This is 1978. So the Imagineers had already designed at this point a Life and Health Pavilion. It was a circus-themed pavilion that would invite guests to learn more about themselves in a number of attractions jutting out from what they called the midway of life. And this was actually a Rolly Crump idea. They knew that as they were developing this, Marty Sklar consulted with, they had a symposium of health experts that came in. And they didn't agree on very much because, sometimes they don't. And there's wide variety of beliefs about health and what you should eat or not eat. And that's changed over the years. So they're like, well, what can we do that we know is kind of like facts? What does everybody agree on? And they had these eight health habits that the experts kind of agreed upon across the board. And that's what they designed this midway of life after. So this is the quote from Rolly Crump for this. He said, I designed it so it was like one of those old-time midways you'd find on a pier somewhere. There was a show in there all about the health habits. Right in the center of it was the Care of Self Carousel. I kind of need to get on that, not going to lie. Which had all the health habits represented as 10 figures. We also tried through up the human body. Sorry, interjecting my own commentary. He says, yes, that does sound similar to what they had when the pavilion finally opened, but that's not how I designed it. What you got was a motion simulator, Body Wars, which I didn't like too much. My idea was pretty different. It was the same type of concept, though. You reduce to a small size and you take a journey through the entire human body. But my version was a sort of smooth roller coaster, in a way, backed by a classical music track. So it would have been a roller coaster with classical music. And he said it would have taken you through all these different organs, while we had a voice coming through telling you exactly where you were. I wanted everything to...
You're in the heart.
Oh my God, that scared me.
It was, yeah, I just wanted to take you out of the smooth to like horrifying.
Oh my God. All right. Now we're experiencing adrenaline is the... that I wanted everything to be anatomically correct in the visuals along with sounds. I wanted it to look and sound like you were actually there. You slowly work your way up to the top of the head and get released into a brainstorm. I did find out from one of our consultants that we really do have brainstorms, and that's where the little roller coaster part would come into play, and it was a neat little idea. So you take a roller coaster with classical music through the body into a brainstorm, which sounds actually really cool, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. You know, we always talk about repurposing ideas. There's no bad idea, and we do utilize a brainstorm in actually Body Wars.
Yeah, it's true. And so they didn't lose all of it for sure. They do have, this shows the Carousel is in the center here of the midway of life. And you can see it's a circular pavilion, which we did end up getting a circular pavilion, but it's a little bit more like each area around the outside is a different section of these 8 concepts for the 8 health habits. And then in the back there, you see this extension. That's where this roller coaster would have been. That goes through the body in the back. So that was the 1978 model. And I love that they had the whole pavilion's theme was life is a carnival, a joy, a wonder. And so do you have information about this, or because I don't want to talk over if you do?
No, I did. The earliest I had was I was starting with the incredible journey and then the creation of the pavilion itself.
Okay. So I have the health habits, some of the little pie pieces that we saw that are around this circle. One was called Good Health Habits, which was a 3-part animatronic fable. And the original theater design was to have a rotational theater, much like the Carousel of Progress. So they would have had kind of a Carousel of Progress theater of good health habits. There was one that was called Head Trip, which is an animatronic show featuring emotion, intellect, and the nervous system, humorously explaining the data handling and communication capabilities in all of us, which sounds a lot like Cranium Command. Like I think it's moved to
a funny way of placing it. Yep.
Yeah. There was a one called Tooth Follies, which I actually have a picture of, which is a musical review centered around your mouth. So it would have been a lot like Kitchen Cabaret, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But it would have been, there's the concept for it. It's like you're inside a mouth, and then all these things happen between the teeth, so to speak. So,
did you know whoever designed that attraction? They won an award. They actually scripted it onto a plaque. You could just brush off the jokes.
Yeah, I got nothing. I don't even know where to go from that.
Tell dentist joke here.
I was like trying to come up with something with flossing. I was like, I got nothing. I'm I'm not good with the dad jokes. I'm here for the information. You got all the jokes.
Fair enough.
They also had a sensory maze that was similar to a sensory funhouse, which we did kind of see that come into the Wonders of Life Pavilion. They had the Joy of Life, an edutainment film showing good health is based off your behaviors. And the Incredible Journey Within, which was what that roller coaster would have been called, was the Incredible Journey Within, which was, they kind of said like it was a suspended ride through the wonders of the human body, but we did see concept art for this. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have 2 different ones. I only got 2.
Yeah, that's what this is. So this is that roller coaster for the Journey Within that Rolly Crump came up with. And yeah, I've got like this one. We have similar ones, I think. So you kind of sit in a roller coaster essentially and go through the body.
Yeah. I also heard that it was possible that they were talking about the Incredible Journey Within potentially being more like a dark ride of a suspended nature. So you were in a red blood cell, but you were suspended like Peter Pan. So think of it as an inverted style of roller coaster.
I heard that too. I just didn't find any concept art for it. So
Yeah, I couldn't find that either. And the other thing is, Marty Sklar, they were trying to kind of go off the concept of adventures through inner space, where we get shrunk down so we can see inside of a snowflake. So in terms of like size and scope, they're thinking, okay, well, that can be similar. You take a microscope, shrink. But I do have one of the reasons why they couldn't do this from Marty Sklar quote.
Yeah.
If you can think of moving a second lung, for instance, that was 30 feet, and it's being controlled while people are moving through it, you can see how different and difficult it would be to accomplish. So basically he's saying, imagine trying to go into, basically the reason why they didn't make this attraction was because it would be too expensive to make giant organs that you physically are going through, because your body is never really still. It's always moving, it's always pulsing, there's always
kinetic
something, right, that's moving inside. So that was their biggest challenge, is you can't just like go into a space and have it still. Everything needs to reverberate and at scale. So that was another one of the larger challenges. So they ended up scrapping it because they just realized it'd be too tough.
Yeah. And Marty also believed, he was the president of Walt Disney Imagineering at this point. He also believed that the health pavilion would be more controversial than any subject they'd taken on, because theories about healthcare and how you manage your own body have changed a lot. So kind of like we said, like that's why they had that symposium. I do want to mention, I do have this one before we move on to like the Wonders of Life Pavilion in general, this last one of this 8th health habits that we never got from the Midway of Life. It's one that's called You Bet Your Life Gambling Hall. And so it was a target practice gallery with a few games emphasizing different aspects of health and fitness, one of which had these little tin toys along the top that showed people doing various activities such as running, swimming, riding a bicycle, so on. They said underneath all these tin toys were different types of food that you would aim at, like an apple or sandwich or a piece of cake. And when you got one of the foods, a computer screen in front of you would tell you how many calories were in it and how long it would take to burn them off while you were doing each particular activity. So you would get the apple and it would say it was 20 calories and it would take an hour to swimming to burn it off. And when you got the cake, it would tell you how many calories it was and it would take 3 days of swimming to get rid of it. He says a really neat little idea and pretty ahead of its time for 1978, which is true. That's pretty ahead of its time for the 70s.
That is. It kind of reminds me of a Toy Story mania where you have a conscience and you hate everything you put in your mouth afterwards. Because, my goodness, could you imagine? I mean, honestly.
Yeah, and especially at a theme park where, like, the food options weren't exactly, like, health food,
No, it's like...
They're not now, mostly, so...
Welcome to the Wonders of Life Pavilion. Don't eat cake. As soon as you walk out, cupcakes, cotton candy, popcorn. It's like, wait.
Yeah, I mean, like, that could have hurt their sales for food at Epcot.
We'll still have to have self-control, and it's vacation. It's different. Like maybe locals in Disneyland make more conscious choices.
Yeah.
Well, or not. I'm not sure. Just because of like the frequency and it's.
Yeah, the culture of LA is just different too. Like there's more health focus on the West Coast in general than the East Coast, and then it's also less of a vacation destination versus I'm going after work, so I need dinner.
Right. So like when you're going on vacation, you're straight up like let's go. Like there's no budget, there's no, you know what I mean? There's no calories. Everyone says theme park calories don't count or Disney calories don't count. I think people still would ignore it. But it's cool that they have that as a concept.
Yeah, it is. And so it's interesting, like you said, the roller coaster itself didn't end up happening because it was just too expensive to finance. But that was also true of like this whole pavilion. They had such a hard time finding sponsors for Epcot. We kind of talked about that in our other Epcot episode about the World Showcase. They really struggled finding sponsors, and Marty Sklar was one of the main people to kind of go out and try to get these sponsors, and they struggled, and they just couldn't find one that would sponsor this Life and Health Pavilion. So it wasn't until 1988 that we actually get a pavilion. Do you want to talk about that? Oh,
sure. Here is... one of the first iterations in its coloration of, this was not called the Wonders of Life. This was called the Life and Health, presented by Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. Most people will know this as MetLife Insurance. So eventually, MetLife will make the commitment to sponsor the pavilion for a whopping $100 million. That's Dr. Evil pinky to mouth. So, yeah, they end up getting the Wonders of Life Pavilion to be sponsored. And they needed $100 million because the dome that they decided they were going to construct was going to be 250 feet wide, 65 feet high, and in front of it would be a giant double helix tower known as the Tower of Life that was standing at 76 feet high. So this was not a small undertaking to create the Wonders of Life Pavilion, which, I mean, as an aside, people are going to say, well, where is this thing? This thing still exists right now. And it's basically used as office space and occasional overflow conference areas / if they have events or private events, they'll use the space for that. But we were supposed to get a play pavilion. This was pre-Panorama and never got completed. So if you're ever passing in between where this geographically is located still, is in between where Cosmic is, so Guardians of the Galaxy. So right there on the left, that would have been Universe of Energy. And then you have the Wonders of Life Pavilion. And then to the right is now where Mission Space is. So this pavilion still exists in its entirety and was supposed to get completely reframed, but we have not had that yet.
Yeah, it's interesting in this picture. You can actually see that back portion like we saw in the 1978 model. You can see it coming out of the back of the building. So there's this whole building on the back of this geodesic dome as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful too. It's crazy that I get how costs can make you not utilize space effectively, but I don't know, it's just such a massive area and can be utilized in a multitude of ways. It's just kind of shocking that it just sits bare.
Yeah, I've been in it one time more recently. I think before the Panini, we went in, Elliot and I went in for when they were selling merch for Food and Wine. And we went in there.
Yeah, it's so weird, right?
And I was like, what is this place?
You're like,
like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
It's like an abandoned building. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very strange. So the Wonders of Life Pavilion opened in 1988. And they announced it was going to be opening in 1988. And Goofy was going to be the mascot for this whole thing. And that was largely because of Michael Eisner really wanted to add more Disney IP into Epcot as a whole, because he didn't like the idea of Epcot was it wasn't going to be like magical Disney fantasy figures. It was going to be more real life, science-based, life-based, earth-based kind of things, right?
Earth-based kind of things.
You know what I mean? Like living with the land and all kinds of things. Right. Like, real things, I guess, rather than fantasy things. And that's why we got Figment as kind of the Epcot mascot for a long time, because that was really the only kind of like mythical figure we had in Epcot. But anyway, so he brought it. It was sponsored by Goofy. And yeah, I'm trying to remember what else. So there was a couple other attractions that we ended up getting besides Body Wars, which we won't get into because that's there's a whole bunch of episodes that we could do on them. But we had Cranium Command, which is an audio animatronic show where guests would join Buzzy, a brain operator in training, as he tries to tackle piloting the most unstable craft in the fleet of a 12-year-old boy. The Making of Me, which was, the making of a baby. So had a lot of warnings on it for parents. And then the Sensory Funhouse allowed guests to explore optical, physical, and auditory illusions. They had Goofy About Health, which is kind of like you're in like the coach's corner in the lifestyle area, in the fitness fairgrounds. So there was a whole bunch of stuff about health, essentially, for the MetLife Pavilion here.
Mm-hmm. And then there was also a little theater in the Dead Center as well that would play basically, again, another wellness teaching tool.
Yeah.
But really the main two e-tickets here were Cranium Command, which was much like Kitchen Cabaret. It was an audio animatronic show. And then the physical attraction was Body Wars.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, though, just as an aside, I thought this was the coolest thing ever. Little did I know that this was the 1989 version of a Peloton.
Right?
Like these little like tiny motorbikes that were stationary, and all you would do is pedal. And by pedaling, the video monitor in front of you would speed up or slow down based on how much kinetic output and speed you were pedaling. So it would take you through various scenes. And I feel like most of them were through the parks. So it was like kind of like POV views of in the parks. It just cracks me up. But I remember doing these as a kid and going, this is so cool. And, but in the 80s, it was easy to impress me. I was like 6.
I did forget, I do have a photo of the incredible journey within queue, which looks like this, because we're going to
that's cool.
Yeah. So that's what it would have looked like. It looks like a whole bunch of like veins, capillaries, those kinds of things on the wall. Gross. Actually, this is way less gross than what we actually got.
Yeah. Very true. Hang on. Can I show the Walt Disney News article for the Wonders of Life that opens up?
Yeah, let's do it.
So in here, they have like little kind of excerpts, and you'll notice this is the first time that we have shown an actual picture of Body Wars. So these red blood cells inside of a vein or a capillary, and the shuttle that we'll talk about in detail. And then those bicycles are there. But it says, take the ride of your life, Body Wars, at this 5-acre pavilion teeming with activities and hands-on entertainment. Epcot Center, an incredibly imaginative celebration of life, is underway at the new Wonders of Life, presented by MetLife. At the center, Body Wars uses Disney's newest simulator technology that miniaturizes and propels you on an intensely thrilling, high-speed roller coaster-like ride through the human body as it fights a bacterial invasion. At Cranium Command, another major attraction, you can climb inside the head of a 12-year-old boy. Nobody wants to do that. For a lighthearted look of how the mind and body interact. And then the gold-domed, The Making of Me is a sensitive film starring Martin Short. I like that they say a sensitive film, which explores the mysterious, tender, and sometimes humorous events surrounding pregnancy and birth. The Fitness Fairgrounds, another hot spot, is a collection of hands-on exhibits. Here you can try tennis, golf, baseball swing, analyzed by the pros. The Wonder Cycle is what I was talking about with the video tour, and then the Sensory Funhouse, which is hosted by Goofy.
They also had the anatomical players as well, which was like improv theater.
Yeah.
About the human body. So just put that out there. Yeah. So I don't even know where to go after that.
It's a weird. Oh, hang on. You know what? The picture of. Hang on. I can show you real quick. What Buzz looked like. There you go. There he is from.
Oh yeah, there he is.
Buzzy from Cranium Command. Fun fact: he was stolen. They did recover him, but the audio animatronic, because this was an area that was accessible, and cast members are in there a lot, so it's not uncommon to see people walking around, and this person just acted like they belong there and stole the audio animatronic when the pavilion closed to the general public. But yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about specifically Body Wars, and if you're good with moving on.
I'm good. Let's move on.
Okay.
Can I talk about Body Wars? Just kidding. I'm messing.
Alrighty. So we already mentioned how this is similar to Adventure Through Inner Space, where you get shrunk down, because Adventure Through Inner Space, you were shrunk down to the size of an atom. This was during the atomic age, of course, where this was a big deal. And people wouldn't have seen things at that scale at that point, because microscopes weren't really powerful microscopes weren't everywhere at that point. Body Wars would have been a dark ride that would take guests through full sail sketch of the trip through the human body. But yeah, another problem you pointed out the fact that they couldn't do this like roller coaster kind because of the sets being too expensive. But another thing that they had was in Adventure Through Inner Space, the sets were too close to the guests. So they would physically reach out, grab things, and destroy them, as guests do to rides. And also, because it was a really long, dark ride, guests would get into mischief on the ride.
Gross. Is this that tender, sensitive film that Martin Short hosts?
Hold on, I'll go get Martin Short.
I mean, honestly, the time of tunnels of love, they are for a reason with dark rides.
Yes. So, and also the expense of making these sets would have been too much. So instead, this ride, Body Wars, had an inspiration for a film that was called The Fantastic Voyage in 1966. So this was a combination of kind of like a Cold War spy film and a clever science fiction one about exploring the inside of the human body. So in the film, a team of specialists get on board a miniaturized submarine and are injected into the body of a defecting Russian scientist who has suffered a dangerous blood clot as a result of an attack by Russian spies. So they have to battle the body itself while white blood cells try to protect the body. And it was the movie was a huge hit for 20th Century Fox and won even 2 Oscars, one for Best Art Direction, one for Best Special Visual Effects. It was also the inspiration for a 1987 film, Joe Dante film, Inner Space, with Martin Short and Dennis Quaid, where a miniaturized pod is injected into a bystander. So these movies were really popular. 1966 is, a decade sooner than this. And then so it's actually 20 years old by this point, but I think it's like it just became really popular in 1987, right before they're creating this pavilion, this movie by called Inner Space. So
yeah, I mean, even if you look at, so I just pulled up the trailer because I had to watch this because I came across the same exact thing, right? Like if you look at the way the bays are, I mean, these are direct reference points. You're going to see us traveling through the body and seeing red blood cells that look very similar to this. And even there's one section where they're showing the suits, and the suits I feel are also somewhat reminiscent of this 1966 film, Fantastic Voyage. Although I have to say, on a personal note, the 1987 Inner Space was one of my favorite movies growing up. It was funny. It was interesting. I remember at one point they have the ability to like attach their little pods to ears and talk to, like Dennis Quaid can talk to Martin Short, like he can hear him in his ears. And it's very funny. It's really good. And then like an evil pod goes in the other one and they have to like battle. It's wild. Have you ever seen that film?
No,
it's great.
This is not one I ever saw. But as soon as I started describing, I sometimes I force Elliot to join me in my Distory research by watching stuff on the big screen, and he was like, "Oh, this is kind of like Inner Space." So like he clearly like knew what it was, and I was like, "I have never seen this movie." So it's on my list now. I've got homework to do. I got to watch the movie, but
it is just iconic 80s. It's also directed by Steven Spielberg. So, it's one of those things where, like, how do you not? It's got Meg Ryan in it. Come on.
Okay, well, if it's got Meg Ryan, then I'm
if it's got Meg Ryan, that's what pulls you in. Well, if it's not Meg Ryan, I'm in.
She was in, what, You Got Mail? Like, come on.
It was one of the year's 10 best, according to Richard Gordon of Time Magazine. You're going to laugh and cheer. No, it was fantastic. Look at this. So Dennis Quaid was in this tiny little capsule, and then the evil dude was in like this one. I don't remember the full synopsis, but it was a fantastic film. You need to see it.
Okay.
Done with
put it on my list.
Yep. Okay.
It's on the list. I think I got to watch Magumbo first.
You can't just say that. You can't. You've got to warn somebody you're going to say Magumbo.
African Queen. I know. I'd say Gumbo. All right. So we could go a couple of different directions from here because this is kind of like the overview of it. Do we want to start? I have notes about the film. I have notes about the ride mechanism. I have notes. We have the physical walk. Where do we want to go?
So I think we need to talk about. We've talked about potentially how they were going to create the Incredible Journey Within as a roller coaster, but we know because of size, scope, space, and cost, they weren't going to do that. So I think we should talk about the ride vehicle because this acquisition and partnership all has to get lined up before you can even have Body Wars in 1989.
Fair enough. All right, let's do it.
So in 1987, the glorious Michael Eisner had an idea. I'm looking at your face. Did you ever see it's like the Grinch? I saw you're like, it was just like, like a
Grinch.
Yeah, it was like, dude, I saw like a sneer, like a grinchy, slow sneer come across your face because you knew what was coming.
Said it that way. You could have said Michael Eisner. Yeah.
No, I would never say that. Why would I say that about somebody who I admire? I would never.
Because they were an East Coast Disney person. If you were West Coast, you'd feel differently. Just saying.
Every time you walk in DCA, you should be thankful.
No.
I wouldn't have DCA without it.
Because the original DCA was trash.
At least it was something, Kate.
Fix it.
When's the last time we've opened a park, Kate?
Well, does it still count as a park if it's like a horrible park that nobody wants to
because
do
you can fix if the Dumbo ears don't work because of frothing oil and needing degreasers.
The elephant
ears, right? If those things can happen, Rome wasn't built in a day. At least they had a foundation.
Cannot compare Disneyland to DCA. Like, at least Disneyland had magic. DCA had no magic. It was dreadful. Anyway, we could talk about this.
So in 1987, Michael Eisner wanted people to ride the movies. And I think that's a really important thematics, especially with Body Wars. And we're going to talk about cast in a bit. But that whole concept of like riding the movies created a partnership with the one and only George Lucas, which allowed Disney to start building attractions based on Star Wars. And the one that they wanted to build the most was this Star Tours. And we're not going to get into Star Tours, but just recognize that Body Wars and Star Tours are going to use the exact same ride system, which was called Atlas, or the Advanced Technology Leisure Application Simulator, which it's basically a giant hydraulic motion simulator that was designed mainly in Essex, England. So this group that made basically like a steering and simulator for commercial airline pilots said they wanted to get into amusements and thematics. So even when they were trying to decide if this could even be a good motion simulation device, all the Imagineers went over there and were trying to figure out what the capabilities of this ride system, the Atlas system, was. And it's large. They decided that it's about 26 tons without guests, 27 tons loaded with guests. It had 6 hydraulic servo actuators, and then it had roughly about 6 degrees of full motion. So if you're into piloting and whatnot, that means that it could heave, surge, sway, pitch, roll, and yaw. That's right. You could do all of it. That was important. It was important because it could create these really dynamic sequences. And eventually, when we get Body Wars, and this is even how Star Tours was programmed, is they put an Imagineer in this motion simulator capsule with a joystick, and they'll play the film sequence that they want, and with a joystick will manually be piloting in the motion controls. So very similarly to how we had motion capture for things like the Carousel of Progress and all those. I mean, yeah, that's the actual unit. So when you ride Star Tours, you're still riding in the Body Wars style vehicles. It's the exact same style ride mechanics. Now, in Star Tours, they have more bays. I think it's 8 total ones, but in Body Wars, they had 4. So ride capacity was actually on this attraction, although when it first opens, it has massive, massive lines. But for a multitude of reasons, that's not going to last that long.
Nope.
So do you have anything else about the ride systems or mechanics? And then we can...
I do have... They said they took technology directly from the space programs. No one had ever seen that. It was kind of crazy. The people that sold those devices, they were just amazed. Will we do something so crazy with it? Which we've seen in Disney history a lot, is like that's what Imagineers take something and they're like, how can we essentially do the opposite of what this is designed to do? Like Tower of Terror elevators, and they make it go, fall twice as fast as it should.
The best part about that is they reach out to the industry leader, Otis, who has been making elevators. If you ever step in an elevator, look around, most of them are Otis elevators. And they literally have to tell them, hey, can you do me a favor? You know all those things that you're really great at, like safety, and can you make it fall?
Like twice as fast as usual. Yeah, it's crazy. So I did find something really interesting about these actuators, that they had a capability of it that they could lock it down. Just the whole simulator itself, they could lock it down if they had an expectant mother who was going to ride, so they could make it actually like tame.
Oh, like would it just be would you just watch the film?
I think it was you could sit and enjoy the film without the jarring movement. Yeah. So it was basically they just wouldn't really move very much. But then somebody who maybe couldn't do all of the crazy movements, and it's because I believe they had 4 of these. Because they had 4 of them, they were able to sometimes have that where if they had enough people that wanted to have a lockdown experience, they could do that for them, which is really interesting.
I bet that came out of guest suggestions because this was extremely intense. There's just showing you right here without getting into the context of things, not talking about the subject material. This was highly motion derived. You would pitch and turn and tweak, and you got to remember this is different than Star Tours, because Star Tours you're in a spaceship. Here you're in a probe, but you're in a probe inside of a person. So things like lungs, heart movement, brain activity would all impact the way that your probe would feel. So, you know, if the heart was beating, you can't just be stationary in the probe because the heart is literally moving the fluid that your ship is suspended in. So there was like no point in this attraction where you were just chill. Like there was no chill. Zero chill, kids.
No, and they actually had a lot more movement programmed into it when it first came out, and they had to tone it down because they programmed every single movement. They programmed like a beat of the heart, beat, like a beat and a beat, and they would do it for the lungs, breathing in and out. There's like a deep breathing part, and so they would have that. And so there's like, it's not only is it like, it's like you're moving in every direction all the time. And the problem was sometimes the system, like the film would not quite line up with what the animators animated for the film. And this is what they call, I'm trying to find my notes on it, but basically it was called cue conflict theory. So this is when what your body is doing doesn't line up with what your eyes see. And so this makes it so that's what causes motion sickness, is when you can't, the two don't, they're not in agreement, essentially. And it's actually the opposite of what happens on Mission Space. So if anybody else out there gets super sick on Mission Space, that is your eyes are seeing that you're not really moving that much, but your body is spinning at high capacity. And that disjointedness between what's happening and what you're seeing is what makes you super, super sick. So it's your inner ears are like, I'm sensing something different is going on than what's actually going on out there. And they actually did cut 20 seconds of the ride film to try to get rid of some of that heartbeat stuff after the ride opened.
Yeah, it was like one part of the heart, and specifically there was a section of the lungs that needed to be removed from the video, which is important later on because that was like one of the more aggressive sections of the actual attraction.
But that's, from what I hear, them making that cut and removing it actually made it worse because it wasn't quite synced up after that point. So then it was like, now it's really out of sync and you can't. And so they had cameras inside of the cabins that they could watch people. And if anybody looked like they were going to get sick, they had a code V, and they would shut it down and make sure that they tried to save that.
Yeah. Lots of protein spills on this one, kids.
Indeed. And it was, anybody who was even a little bit prone to motion sickness, this was like not.
I mean, they warn you. It's highly turbulent simulator type thrill ride that includes the human body with sharp turns and sudden drops. And they do mention, but this is like a catch-all that they have for most rides, that you should be in good health. If you have high blood pressure, heart, back, neck problems, motion sickness, or other conditions, they could be aggravated by the adventure, and expectant mothers should not ride. But the truth is, you can't prepare for this ridiculousness. It was, as a kid, so I've been on this attraction. I've ridden it plenty of times, because it's open from October 19th, 1989, and it goes all the way until January 1st, 2007. So there was plenty of time for people to ride this, and I loved it for one specific reason. There was no line. Nobody wanted to go on this thing.
Never.
I'm like, this is the greatest ride ever. This
Opening
Maelstrom.
was the last time there was.
Oh, dude, I can go on Maelstrom and Body Wars all day as a kid and be fueled by some sort of crazy German or African Coca-Cola with like 20 times the caffeine. And I just ride those bad boys all day with no lines. It was great. Nobody knew they existed because they were so far behind everything. Everyone goes to the stuff that's like in the front. You got to go explore. Nobody explored Norway. Nobody explored the Wonders of Life Pavilion. True. And they should.
That's back in there. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they go there for Frozen now. Like, everybody knows about that. But...
Yeah. Well, they took my trolls away from me.
I'm sorry. We got to do Maelstrom at some point. We got to do about it.
I don't want to do Frozen though.
You're gonna have to.
I don't want to though, Kate. Okay, I don't want to. I know I have to. I'm just telling you what I don't want.
So can we talk a little bit about the film that's in it before we do through the actual ride experience?
Yeah.
And the queue and stuff. So the film was directed by Leonard Nimoy. So Mr. Spock. He recently finished directing Touchstone's Three Men and a Baby. If you remember, Touchstone is kind of a division of Disney. It's when Disney started to produce movies that maybe weren't as like G-rated. They were a little bit higher. They're family movies, but they're still a little bit, the stuff that wasn't traditional Disney in it. They made the whole division that's called Touchstone for it. So this is what Leonard Nimoy said about this film. He said, even though Body Wars was the shortest film I've ever directed, it presented a new set of challenges. We had to take into account the film would be shown inside a moving theater, the simulator. So in order to intensify the sense of motion, we built a set that actually moves and rocked it during filming to match the pitching and rolling of the simulator. So that was what he said about that. The cast of the movie included Tim Matheson as Captain Braddock Dakin, I think it's Dakin Matthews as Mission Commander, Elizabeth Shue as Dr. Cynthia Lair, and Imagineering show producer also was not in the film, but is Barry Braverman, just to give a little FYI.
We can't gloss over this. You're glossing over this like it's no big deal.
I'm not glossing. I know you have something to say about it, so I'm just waiting.
Oh.
I'm giving the facts. I'll let you just do your thing.
These are huge casted characters for
they are.
Like, I think about this, right? For the time period in the 80s, especially Elizabeth Shue. Elizabeth Shue was in Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3, and The Karate Kid. Like,
they were big names.
They huge. Tim Matheson, he was doing some language stuff, but he also was in National Lampoon's Animal House. Huge.
Yeah. Which, by the way, was filmed at the University of Oregon. So you're one.
Was it?
Yeah,
it's cool.
It was filmed. We have sororities and fraternities there.
Okay.
Yeah. So
and then
claim to fame
for Dakin Matthews, he was in Star Trek Voyager and also apparently did some voice acting in a Goofy movie. I know I have a picture of him when he was in Star Trek
with Leonard Nimoy.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Is it makes sense that they would put somebody that they may have worked together in a previous position. So it's like funny to see him. But like nowadays, because my name's Kirk, right? Back in the day, to differentiate Kurt and Kirk, I am a Kirk with a K. People would always go, oh, Kirk, like the captain. I can't get away with that anymore. I got nothing. Nobody knows Captain Kirk. There's no one Trekkies.
He calls you Captain Kirk all the time.
Elliot was born in the 80s. I'm talking about like people nowadays, you can't talk to them about Captain Kirk. They don't know what they're talking about,
It's true. That's true. But there are a lot of parts of this attraction. Okay, you can go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's Elizabeth Shue, dude. It's Elizabeth Shue. It was Johnny's girlfriend. Karate Kid. All right.
I know Karate Kid. We're in the same year as you, okay? So
I thought you just said I don't know Karate Kid, and I almost was like, well, this is a great time doing this podcast with you, and I don't know if we can continue.
Everybody wanted to do karate after that. That was what you did. Like, you would stand in your living room, like balance on the furniture. That's what you did. No, so I feel like a lot of the elements of Body Wars were inspired in part by some scenes from Star Trek. Like, there's definitely like tables, desks, and command centers and whatnot that they're standing at. That I was like, that looks like it's straight out of Star Trek. So it's really interesting.
I actually have check out this set of Elizabeth's shoe. He led like a giant splitter because they use green screen effects, but then also use practical effects. So I just think that's like so fascinating to see what it would look like, because again, she's supposed to be floating in substance. You know what I mean? So it's just wild to see what it looks like before and in post. You know?
Yeah. So what I have is what it looked like in the actual film.
Yeah. So like they had to do it this way, vertical, and then just horizontally shifted the film sequence, which I think is cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I have a few more notes about the film. It had anatomical images that were produced by computer graphics for the realistic experience of traveling through the human body, which I think also added to like the ick factor for people getting sick on it, because it looked fairly realistic.
What's gross about this? Who doesn't want to fly around a capillary with a bunch of blood everywhere? You guys don't like plasma?
There's so many people that like it. You know, there's people that pass out at the sight of blood. There's people that like can't handle the body parts. Okay, so just saying. When the ride was being programmed, the Imagineer watched the film repeatedly while moving the computerized joystick to indicate the movement and synchronize the ride of the film, which we talked about. Why are you still laughing?
I don't. When you edit this, you'll.
Oh my goodness. Something that was really interesting, though, with this film that I think is fascinating is that originally it used a 70 millimeter film that ran at 24 frames per second. But they needed a new projection system for Star Tours and for Body Wars that could withstand the vehicle, because that's not usually something you do with projectors, is you don't have them shake and move around. So the problem, though, was how to store the film in an endless loop. This is what Don Iwerk said. The outside back of the cab was the only surface available, as the entrance and exit doors were on the sides. We worked out a very successful system whereby the film from the projector located at the front of the simulator was transported on sprockets and rollers underneath the cab to the outside rear panel, where under mild tension the film was laced through a multitude of sprockets and rollers and returned underneath the simulator back to the projector. It was probably the longest film loop in history, but it worked flawlessly. And it was there until high-definition video projection replaced it. So I think that's wild that the film ran underneath you and then ran through a whole series of rollers and whatnot on the back of the vehicle and then ran back underneath it to the front. Like, how crazy is that?
You got to do what you got to do.
I guess so.
Yeah, and honestly, what's also interesting about this film sequence, and it's important that it runs underneath, is that the ride film itself would fire off the physical movements of the ride vehicle. So they used some sort of embedded time code pulses inside the filming, which would associate then with the ride's motion based arms. So literally, while the film is going through and the time codes are being read by the projection and the computers, that's what's creating the sequences. So when they chopped off sections, like literally sections, the time codes jumped, and that's one of the major reasons why it was out of sync and really funky.
That's wild. I do remember reading at one point a story about how when they brought George Lucas in for the first time, and they kind of were like walking him through what they were doing in Imagineering at that point, and he was kind of seeing all the different ideas that they had, and was when he got to this idea of a simulator, he was like, this is perfect for Star Wars, because you can actually like feel like you're flying in the Millennium Falcon or whatever it is, like you could sit in a spaceship and go somewhere. So it was George Lucas that kind of chose that for Star Tours, which I think is really interesting. We won't talk anymore about Star Tours, but I just wanted to mention that was kind of how this came about. What?
I just realized I saw the making of me. I remember this animation. There's like a little puzzle piece with like a little snippet of that. Not traumatized, because I clearly, or it's just like so embedded in my psyche that but I remember it and being like, this is weird. I don't think my parents definitely didn't know what it was.
Oh yeah, they have warnings all over the place for it, but it's I watched it because I hadn't seen it in person, so I watched it online, and I was like, Elliot was like, "What are you watching?" I was like,
"It's real for Distory."
Yeah. Anyway, so should we start the queue? It looks like that's where we're headed. Yeah. Headed into the ride experience here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Frank Armitage who made that mural that's outside the queue that you can see there.
It's beautiful. It's huge too. It's not a tiny piece.
No, it's gorgeous. It kind of wraps around several areas of that in that pavilion there. I have kind of a closer up. Oh, you've got the same one. Look at us. This is what we do. I think this is what you just said. I'm so tired today.
I know, bro, we just did 4 episodes in like 2 days, and yeah, it's a lot. It's all good.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's all I have at the outside of the queue. Do you have anything else about the outside before we go in?
I do not have outside. However, I do have some of these ones on the inside. So we had talked about the sponsor for $100 million for this pavilion being the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, aka MetLife. So they had a part in naming what this science lab is, which is the MET, M-E-T, which is an acronym for the Miniaturized Exploration Technologies. So that's the lab that we are going to be getting into a ship, which this is the first time that I see one of the ships and what they're supposed to look like. Now, granted, this is a facsimile, as you don't actually board this style of ship, but this is what is seen in the film as well. This is a L65-2050 body probe vehicle. However, when we...
Ready, hop aboard.
However, it sounds safe. It's like what the aliens use on us. So, but we actually get into a call sign vehicle, one of these L65-2050s that is known as Probe Bravo 229.
Yeah. I did see also that this was the first Epcot attraction to have restrictions to ride. This was essentially Epcot's first thrill ride. So the other submarines that they listed to create the illusion, but you don't board them because you always get on board submarine 229. That's your ride. But they had Zulu 714, Sierra 657, Foxtrot 817, and Charlie 218. Very like names that pilots would use.
This is exactly like Simba 2. I'll never ever ride Simba 2 or Probe Zulu.
Yeah. Sad day.
Sad days.
They also went through a dermatopic purification portal. So, which actually kind of reminds me of if you're on Flight of Passage for Pandora, and they kind of like have the air and it blows all the little critters or whatever off of you. Kind of the same idea.
Yeah, you go into this section, which has like a pre-show, and it reminds me of, we watch the pre-show in Star Tours now directly before you board, and then you go over the little gangway that goes into the ride vehicle. But here in the queue, you're watching a pre-show, which is coming from the commanders who are speaking to you about, Dr. Davis is planning the route, and that will have Captain Braddock pilot the ship, and the commander is giving all of kind of the orders. So we learn a little bit more about the ships. We do learn that we are going through a body, and then as Kate had mentioned, all the way at the end, it's like this little tiny arch that has some red lights, and it goes wah 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 wah. It's very, you feel like you're clean afterwards.
They could use that today at Epcot.
They can use that. They could use that when I walk into the Guardians pre-show. They could use that in the stretching room. I could use this in a lot of places.
I think it would be a good thing to have. I don't know if it's this pre-show movie or maybe it's the one that I feel like they had more than one pre-show movie for this. Like you see one and then
there's two different well, there's technically three things that are going on, right? So you have the first one, which is like a lab tech. The lab tech explains like what the process is going to look like. Then the second pre-show, which is this one, which is also houses the safety spiel. And then you have another real quick, like how to get on your seatbelt. And that's playing in a vertical format, very similar to how in Star Tours, you see C-3PO on the right-hand side of the ride vehicles. We would have that as well in the Body Wars vehicles, but still your main cabin is where you would do most of your focal point.
Well, can I just say that I was watching the pre-show video for it and I laughed out loud because of what they put in there. They if you look at the back row, they have the dude with the helmet on is of course Wayne Szalinski from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Great.
And they have they even show him putting his little helmet that he uses to look for his kids underneath his seat, you know, that.
Yeah.
And here's it.
Timing wise, when was Honey, I Shrunk the Audience in Epcot? Because this would be like a great tie-in to that.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I'm gonna look it up real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
But I also love that there's this purple Figment hat in the front row, which is just stellar. So, yeah, so they have a little nod to Wayne Szalinski and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Honey, I Blew Up the Audience.
So this didn't show up until 1994. So after it, but Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was a film that came out in 1989. So timing wise, again, this is a classic thing that Eisner loved to do, is make tie-ins to films to promote. So
right,
that makes sense.
Just cram as much movies in there as possible. That was his MO.
The great movie ride, Kate. Did you hate that?
Those weren't even Disney movies. I do like Great Movie Ride, but
okay, yeah, I like how you went on an anger trip and then you dialed it. You knew what you had to do. I know.
Movie Ride, like
I know the right things to say that you can't argue with. So,
do we need to replay that?
No,
we don't.
All right,
keep going. I'm gonna get my 1994 sticker out here. It's around somewhere. 1994, Kirk. 1994. Alrighty. So we're in the queue. Do you have anything else for the queue itself?
I do not.
Okay. Shall we go into the ride experience?
Yeah.
So the probe's captain, Jack Braddock, so he sets out on a routine medical mission with a crew of civilian observers, which would be the guests, right? And both the submarine and crew are miniaturized by a particle reducer the size of a single cell and beamed inside the human body to rendezvous with Dr. Cynthia Lair, who's Elizabeth Shue. Since she's essentially an immunologist who has also been miniaturized to study the body's response to a splinter being lodged under the skin, which is what Kirk is showing you there. The mission then kind of becomes a high-speed race against time. Stop. When Dr. Lair is swept from the splinter site into a rush in the bloodstream. And she says, directly in front of us is a group of white blood cells on their way to destroy the splinter. And then you go through the pounding chambers of the patient's heart and through the lungs, and gale force winds. So the ship rode the body's current into an effort to rescue Dr. Lair. And even after she was safely on board, there are still problems because the ship loses power and heads towards the brain in search of emergency and escape, which is like the brainstorm, right? That we got from Rolly Crump.
Yeah, in one part in the script, they talk about passing over the blood-brain barrier so that they can use the electrical charges and then be able to get back. But what's interesting about the sequencing, so like Kate's going through like the whole synopsis of the story, it goes from, hey, we're going to go into the subdermal layer of the skin, very safe, very calm. We're going to look at a splinter, and then, boom.
Christ.
Doctor gone. She's out. She gets sucked into a capillary, and then now we have to chase her down and find her. Although, the one thing that is very curious to me is that she does not have a ride vehicle. She's just like in there. So they just like made her small and zapped her in. I'm assuming they probably like put her in a syringe and put her at the site of the splinter something like that. But like, there's no real explanation because they say like she teleported. Granted, we're getting miniaturized a 27-ton vehicle to the size of a drop of water, so it's not exactly apples to apples, but still.
I think you can't think about it too hard because
I have to.
It doesn't make sense because like, where was her vehicle? Like, she should have had one. You know, if we had one, how come we just didn't have like suits and going?
Wait, is everybody else like here? I don't think you heard. I said exactly that, dude. That's what I'm saying. Is that I think, yeah, I said she doesn't have a ride vehicle. I think they put her in a syringe and put her in the action site.
I missed that part. I saw her the syringe.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm so sorry.
You're good, dude. But you're right. Where is, they don't really address it. They just go that she like basically teleported there, and you're like, what? Wait, what? How did that happen?
That is weird. Yeah. What is it?
I like how this kid, the woman is holding her neck like, oh, and the kid's like peeking through its little paws, you know? And this dude's like, his hair's blown off.
I'm still trying to figure out why they call it Body Wars. Because it's like, is the body?
No.
Or with it like white blood cells?
There is a war at one point because
there's a white blood cells.
No, because we have to attack the white blood cells because they view Elizabeth Shue as like a foreign object, so they start attacking her. So they have to destroy the white blood cells around her so that she doesn't get destroyed like a piece of bacteria. And then she joins us on board on our ship, and then we basically get pushed to another area and lose power, and that forces us to get up to the brain.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, you convinced me. Alrighty. So Body Wars opened in October 18th of 1989, and Star Tours opened 2 months later. And from everything that I've read, they said that because MetLife sponsored this entire pavilion, they asked that Star Tours not be opened at the same time as the studio, like the rest of everything, because they wanted it to premiere, the ride technology to premiere in the MetLife Pavilion. So,
I mean, you spent $100 million. I would agree with them. I think they are just.
Yeah, I think that was a fair compromise for them to make. But in 1994, there was a survey done that said that this was the most popular guest ride at Epcot. So at one point in time, it was popular.
Well, you got to remember, this is before. Think about the things prior to this. You had the Universe of Energy, which is basically like, oh, let's learn about oil for like a decade, and then, oh, I get to see a dinosaur for half a second, right? Like, that's what that was. So, understandably.
Can I just say that my memory of Universe of Energy, of going on it, was like the cast member warning us like 40 times that this is like a really long ride, and you can't get off it. Like, that was like the main message I get from that.
I remember, so I've ridden it twice at least. I rode it pre-Ellen, and I rode it with the addition of Ellen, and the addition of Ellen was way worse. The original one, like, it was really boring. Like, it reminded you of being in an auditorium in your school, and they're pressing play on like the worst how oil is made. It's like, you're just watching in a theater, and it's like kind of like a circle theater, but it's not fully around you. And then it gets exciting because the actual theater starts moving, and you're like, what? And there's just like big like brontosaurus like swinging with like a bunch of moss in his mouth, and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, we grind those things up, and that's what we drive with. All right, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's what it was, like a bunch of pressure on him. Just squeeze the dinos for about 1 million years, and then he turns into, I don't know, it's like a thick liquid. We just go, just put that in a machine.
That was pretty much Universe of Energy right there.
If you need me to do any others, I can't. You know, but back then, the one thing I will say is we did have cast members doing Living with the Land, and that was spectacular. I did miss that when it went to a tape because it lost a personality, because I thought the skippers and their spiels similar, great and different every time. It was slightly unique and different from script. So
yeah, I never experienced it with live narration, but I have a feeling I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more, because I mean I still enjoy Living with the Land, and especially now after we went on the behind the scenes tour, but
Yeah, that makes
It's never been like my favorite ride because I'm just like, this is always the same thing pretty much, except the vegetables change, you know? So.
Well, okay, ready? So Test Track doesn't open until March 17th of 1999. So, in 94, again, I don't see really many other e-tickets giving it a run for its money. I mean, Journey into Imagination was great, but again, none of these are thrilling attractions. And, one thing that Eisner really wanted to do was kind of like plus and make it more comparable to a Universal in terms of thrill experience. So to try to elevate that so we didn't lose guests leaving Walt Disney World and doing a day at Universal, which a lot of people ended up doing because they had older kids and, maybe they outgrew some of the experiences there. So that's why we got a more adult-like or teenager-friendly style attractions like a Body Wars.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all back into what Eisner wanted to do, right, is add more teenager adult attractions into the parks in general. That was kind of his MO, is so they didn't lose customers, guests to competition, that maybe had more thrilling attractions, because Disney was not known for its thrill rides, still isn't like fully known for its thrill rides. It's more of a theme park, but it does have quite a few more thrilling rides than it used to back in the day. So,
yeah.
Alrighty, do you have anything else about the ride itself?
Nothing about the ride itself, except for we succeed. We're safe.
We're safe, but we do come back out of the body.
Yeah, we do jumpstart with some electricity, and that allows us to again get reversed and become big again.
Yeah. So I have what happened to Body Wars. So we've already talked about how this pavilion's kind of abandoned. Do you have anything before?
Not yet. I was gonna say, I think it was in. So this has like kind of a troubled past. We said there's a lot of reasons why Body Wars didn't work, right? So one, if you were sensitive to motion, this is way more aggressive than what Star Tours is today, even. Number two, it's gross. Like, it's a bunch of blood and yuck and plasma and like...
That's what I said. And you were like, it's not gross.
No. I'm saying why it didn't work for the general public. I'm not talking about the 20%, which is me, who absolutely adore this attraction. It still exists. Let me on it. So, and then, and then they also had a major issue. I'm missing my year for when it happens, but there was a guest. There was a girl who had a unforeseen heart condition. And sadly, much like Mission Space, there was an incident where basically like midway through the ride, she just stopped breathing. They took her, airlifted her to a hospital, and sadly she didn't make it because she had this very, very rare heart condition. And that's actually one of the reasons for, again, they're thinking like, well, is this too impactful? But back in 96, already 26 million guests had gone through and ridden Body Wars, which is an insane amount of people to go through this attraction, which at times, in peak times, would have an hour or 2 hour wait in Epcot. So that always is at the back of folks' minds, is like, how does this impact guest experience? I remember when it happened with Mission Space, a lot of people refused to go on it after that happened. This is a rare 0.0001 experience, and it's awful. It's an awful tragedy. But they opened the ride literally the day after, and that's very typical of when these things happen. But there is a stigma against an attraction from there on out. And people are less likely to go onto Mission Space Orange, or we're less likely, in this case, to go on Body Wars.
Well, like Mission Space, at least when I went on it, the one time I went on it, never again, they like physically hand you a card that like warns you how extreme it is. Like they don't even they have signs, but they also physically like handed you a card and be like, read this.
They stopped doing that, but now they use cast member checks. So they'll go, are you okay? Are you good? And they literally will go around and say, I need you to say you're good.
Yeah.
It's like a verbal contract.
Should have been my biggest warning that I shouldn't have been on that ride.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like a roller coaster.
Did you do orange or did you do...
Oh, I did orange. Oh. And I didn't like... I feel like I probably could handle green, but I was so traumatized by orange that I will never go on it again.
Yeah, I mean, green just like rattles around a bunch. Orange is a space coffin, and I hate it, but I forced myself to go on it. I have wicked bad like enclosures and claustrophobia. So when this is very typical of that attraction too, you'll go onto Mission Space Orange and it won't move for a while.
Yeah.
So you'll be stuck with a screen in your face, like less than 4 inches, and you're just stuck. Like you can't get, and there's no music, there's no sound. So what I do is I fiddle with switches and go, everything's fine. I fiddle with switches. You can touch things and turn things off, and it doesn't do anything except for it's like a fidget cube for me. It's like it just gets my mind off the fact.
I didn't realize it was so. I knew that it was like supposed to be an intense ride, but I didn't know it was so claustrophobic until I got it. And then the thing comes down and it's like here, and you're like, it's okay.
There's no getting away from it. You're in it.
And then you're like, I made a huge mistake, and there's nothing I can do. I just remember like telling myself to breathe the whole time, and like my things were lighting up because I was supposed to be pushing buttons, and I started like hitting everything because I was like, I just keep breathing, just keep. And luckily I didn't like lose it, but my head was so messed up. We actually lost an entire day at Epcot. I had to go, both Elliot and I had to go lay down for the whole rest of the day because we felt so awful. And I was like, that is never something I want to repeat.
Well, you are more sensitive to rides for sure. So, especially like spinning type things or those types of sensations definitely impact you a lot. So,
Yeah, I don't.
Hey, you just stay away from them. So, all right. So October 18th or 19th, depending on what you want to look at, 1989, all the way through January 1st, 2007, when this attraction finally closed. You want to take it from there?
Well, yeah, let's go back to 2001 because that's when the MetLife sponsorship expired. But Epcot still continued to operate the Wonders of Life Pavilion. But now they had no money to do it. They had a pavilion, but they had nobody sponsoring it, and they had no money. So this pavilion slowly just kind of like deteriorated. Like there was no make really like beyond.
Yeah, no painting, no nothing. It was just falling apart.
There was just no money for it. So MetLife's refusal to continue their financial support for Wonders of Life might have been tied to an internal dispute over cast member insurance policies. So that's another possibility is why they pulled out. Yeah.
They probably were looking at that $100 million. I don't know whether or not MetLife was the cast member service provider, but I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if there was something that was commingled.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't work out. And so then they lost all their funding. So Disney stopped giving it much maintenance or attention at that point. And then 2004, they announced that it would have, the attraction would just have a seasonal operation, which we see this before. And usually the seasonal operation's kind of
that's
like
the kiss of death.
That is. It's like it's the beginning of the end.
Stitch's Great Escape went to a seasonal operation. Trying to think of other attractions that closed indefinitely that did seasonal operation. Primeval Whirl, seasonal operation.
Yeah, Canoes did that in Disneyland. We thought when it went seasonal that it would never come back, but that was surprisingly, the Canoes did come back in Disneyland, and it's seasonal. It's mostly when it's really busy.
You canoe it.
What?
Like, it's like Waterboy.
No, I know, but I knew Waterboy, but I'm like, what? Okay.
You can do it. You can, oh my gosh. Explain it. Comedy.
That was funny because I'm tired. So the entire pavilion would eventually close on January 1st of 2007. And then, like we said, they continued to use it for some conferences and some food festivals and all these kinds of things. But the large building that we pointed out at the beginning of this that has the kind of rectangular building in the back, that houses the 4 simulators for it. And some of them are still kind of there, but they're like used for spare parts for Star Tours, from what I hear. That's the rumor. Rumor has it.
You know what? I want the rumor that now that we have high definition projectors, put the film in one Star Tours thing, let it run for a month. Let's go. Let's just
just a month. I could do a month. Yeah, a month I can get behind. I was like, well, they're not bringing this back. Like,
I mean, listen, 1989, right? We got to wait until 2029. In 2029, I'd like to have Body Wars back for a month. And they run it just in one bay of Star Tours.
Well, you know that they can do those kinds of things because, like, we get Soarin' Over California in DCA every once in a while, and during the food festival.
Okay, think about this for a second. what if, and I'm not saying that it's technologically the easiest thing to implement or anything, but like, we don't want to talk about all the problems. We want to talk about solutions. If you want guests to have unbelievable experience and really wow them, what if you sold a Hollywood Studios event ticket that allowed them to ride Body Wars one more time? Instant sellouts.
There would not be that many people that want that. There's like,
are you, Kate, did you see like Oogie Boogie Badge or Mickey's Not So Scary, or that's you? That's one person.
To be fair, there's a lot of attractions that if you brought them back for like one night only, yes, it would be instant sellout. I'm not 100% convinced that Body Wars would be it.
Elizabeth Shue brings the crowd. It's Back to the Future. Come on, Leonard Nimoy right now.
Buying a ticket.
Yeah, I would. I would buy a ticket.
I would buy a ticket because I'd be interested, but then I would have to take some like Dramamine so I could actually ride it.
Yeah, see? We even get the non-believers.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I there's so many other things I'd want them to bring back first. Just
listen. All right, ready? I'll get you on this one. Epcot. Well, you guys get it over there. Epcot, I know for people over here in Walt Disney World, if they did one night where they brought back Soarin' Over California, or if they even just did Soarin' Over California for like the after hours events, and I know that's like, oh, you got to change all the scents out and all this. I get it. I get it. All right. Don't beat me up. But it's cool.
They did. Well, I think they should bring it back for the festival that has the orange bird. Which one is that? The Flower and Garden
That's
Festival?
Flower and Garden. Flower and Garden would be perfect for it.
And it's not even that long of a festival. So it would make sense to just do kind of a short run. And you got the smell of oranges in there. Like,
you get people showing up to Flow Grow more than they are now.
It's true.
And it's a great festival. It's like my favorite of the food festivals over there too. So
me too. It's so beautiful. I love that festival. Well, I don't think I have anything else on Body Wars. Do you?
Yeah. The only thing is, if you are curious and you want to see more, there are lots of great YouTube resources that you can watch. You can also watch like any of the urban exploring videos, which exist both on TikTok and YouTube, where people have broken into this pavilion, which we are not recommending. But if you're curious, people have done that. And it is very interesting to see the inside of basically the 80s in a time capsule. It's wild.
Yeah, if you ever get the chance, like if they open it up for merch or an event or something, like
go. If
you have the opportunity, go just so you can go in that building.
Because I think I have one picture of when they were doing I saved that. There was like an Epcot food. Yeah, here, hang on. I've got an Epcot.
Do we have the same one?
Yes, probably. Yes, we do. Yeah, if they do something with Food and Wine or ever they're using it for any type of event, go do it, go inside. So cool.
Yeah. I do know that in the background too, the conference rooms look kind of like circus-like. So they really took that midway of life theming and they brought it into the conference areas of this pavilion, but that's not something that guests would often get to see. But this is a more recent one of what it looks like. And even the bathrooms, I don't want to show a picture of the bathrooms, but the bathrooms even have like circus tent like doors to them and it still exists.
Creepy.
Yeah. So the circus theme is alive and well in the back room.
I would love to check out this area, and I would love to see in between the Soarin' entrance and Soarin' exit where Kitchen Cabaret / Food Rocks. I would love to get in there and see that theater. It exists. It's there.
Me too.
You know, and I think I've told you this, that the Stitch's Great Escape / Extraterrestrial is like a break room. Like you can just sit, you can just sit where the seats were. It's so weird.
They have that in Disneyland on Tom Sawyer Island. They have the fort that is there is like literally just a cast member like break area. Because I didn't go in anywhere I shouldn't have, but I just peeked between like the wood slats from the outside. There's like an old couch like sitting in the middle of it. I was like, okay, this is where the cast members hang.
It's weird. It makes sense because it's just from a guest perspective, like we would love access to these places and we never will. So
yeah,
it's okay.
So I would never ever myself ever go behind somewhere you're not supposed to go. We don't advocate for that at all. Nope. But there's other people that have, and you can watch what they've done. So, it's out there. I don't know if I would want to support a lot of people to do that, but there's photos and things of backstage stuff.
For science.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for Body Wars.
That's all I got.
I'm going to hop on my carousel and
you need the self carousel.
Carousel.
Yeah.
Before we totally wrap, I just want to mention that a lot of the research that I found on body worth and this was from a book called The Secret Stories of Extinct Walt Disney World. I supplemented it with some other primary sources just because I always do, but that book was written by Jim Korkis, who a lot of people know as a Disney historian, and unfortunately he passed away this past month, so little sad story. So a little shout out to Jim Korkis. Thank you for all of the Disney history research he's done over the year. Prolific interviewer of a lot of Imagineers and people who worked in the Disney parks. So very sad to lose him. But so yeah, let's wrap it up. Thank you everybody for joining us for this episode of Distory as we went inside the body and went for the ride of our lives. So Kirk, do you have any final thoughts?
This ride was awesome, and it was not one of my icks.
Well said. It probably would have been one of mine, but that's okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time for Distory. Have a great weekend.